The Parris Island graduation ceremony was unfolding with solemn dignity, but a single moment shattered the facade. A single mother, standing quietly on the edge of the crowd, inadvertently exposed her wrist while wiping sweat. The tattoo on her skin was a fierce primal wolf, superimposed over the number 12. Captain Andrew Stone, a Marine Corps intelligence officer, instantly froze. He whispered in disbelief, "Ghost Recon Unit 12, the unit completely erased from the records. According to all sources, she cannot possibly be alive." All eyes now turned toward the legend buried beneath a mask of normalcy. Her name was Elena Ward, 42 years old, and her life was a carefully constructed facade centered around the small, sun-drenched apartment she rented in rural North Carolina. The community knew her only by her tireless resilience. A single mother who worked the overnight shift at a logistics depot and picked up day shifts at a roadside diner, sacrificing every spare dollar so her son, Jake, could complete his military training without financial burden. Elena was obsessed with maintaining her cover. She was polite, friendly, but absolutely sterile in conversation, always deflecting questions about her past, her history, or her life before motherhood. She needed the world, and most crucially Jake, to believe she was nothing more than an ordinary, if fiercely determined woman. But for Jake, she was his foundation, a beacon of almost frightening strength, unwavering patience, and unbreakable resolve. He remembered a crisis years ago, a pipe burst in the dead of winter. While he panicked, Elena, without a single word of complaint, located the main shutoff, navigated the flooded basement in darkness, and fixed the break with improvised tools she kept in a utility drawer. To him, this resilience was just mom being mom, a tough woman who could handle anything life threw at her. Jake was the reason for her existence. Since the day he left for Parris Island, Elena had been a constant, if distant, presence, ensuring she never missed a single family day, enduring the long, exhausting drives with a stoicism that was deeply ingrained. She had never, ever spoken of the life she led before the silence, before the years of calculated disappearance. Jake didn't know that his mother had an official, unreleased rank, or that she spoke 6 languages, or that her primary job for the better part of a decade was making sure critical individuals stopped breathing. The graduation ceremony was monumental. Jake was becoming a United States Marine. Elena stood far back, instinctively seeking the perimeter where the risk of close interaction was minimized. She watched her son, so straight, so proud in his dress blues, and her heart swelled. It was the only reward she ever needed. The crowd around her was a dizzying mix of proud parents and extended family. Elena remained still, her vigilance active, constantly scanning the environment. She felt safer cloaked in the anonymity of the crowd, a habit forged in environments where exposure meant death. A woman beside her leaned over, smiling. "Who's your Marine, honey?" Elena offered a practiced, soft smile. "Jake, Private Ward, 13 weeks of pure grit. You must be bursting with pride," the woman said. "More than I can express," Elena replied, the truth of the statement escaping her carefully controlled demeanor. It was the sweltering heat that betrayed her. Instinctively, she moved her hand to wipe the sweat from her temple. She pulled her worn shirt sleeve up slightly, a brief, involuntary movement. In that exposed instant, the symbol was revealed, the sharp, stark silhouette of a black wolf's head superimposed over the numeral 12. This wasn't just a military tattoo. The wolf was the official emblem for the Shadow Reconnaissance Divisions, the units that moved without leaving a trace. The numeral 12 designated her specific cell within the highest tier of special operations, an operational group that was supposed to have been completely destroyed and then erased from the digital record 15 years prior. The tattoo was a mark of belonging, a promise, and a death warrant if it fell into the wrong hands. Elena felt the cold jolt of adrenaline. She snatched her sleeve back down, her heart hammering against her ribs. But the fractional delay was too much. Across the tarmac, Captain Andrew Stone, a man whose entire career was built on the precision of military history and intelligence, saw it. He recognized the exact shade of ink, the style of the wolf's snarl, the distinct geometry of the numeral. He had only seen it in a single high-security image that had been flagged for immediate deletion. Andrew lowered his binoculars, his hands trembling slightly. Unit 12 had been sacrificed to cover a massive international incident. They were ghosts, officially declared dead to protect national interests. Their existence was a tightly controlled secret. Yet here was the ghost, standing quietly watching her son. The anonymity was shattered. Elena Ward was about to discover that the grave she had dug for her past was not deep enough. Captain Andrew Stone could not look away. His mind raced, calculating the implications. If this woman was who her tattoo suggested, her presence here was not coincidental. It was a massive security breach waiting to happen. The unit she belonged to had been zeroed out, removed from all personnel files, medical records, and operational databases to prevent political fallout. They were legally and officially non-existent. A curious lieutenant approached Andrew. "Sir, the formation is holding, but you look like you've seen a phantom. What's the problem?" Andrew spoke through barely parted lips. "Lieutenant, if that woman is who I suspect, the problem is not hers. It's ours. This whole base is compromised." The whisper quickly traveled among the senior officers. Captain Stone identified a Ghost Recon insignia on a civilian. A retired sergeant major, known for his encyclopedic memory of all things special operations, overheard the buzz. He was instantly grave. "There are no survivors from the 12th. Anyone who says otherwise is peddling treason. That mark is fake, Captain. Forget you saw it." Andrew knew better. He saw the way the woman stood, the quiet command of her posture, the hyper-awareness in her eyes. It was not the stance of a suburban mother. Andrew straightened his dress uniform and began his deliberate approach. He needed information before the ceremony released the crowd, and she vanished for good. He stopped just short of violating her personal space. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet but commanding, "I apologize for the intrusion, but I need to ask again. Is that insignia a genuine piece of unit history?" Elena remained motionless, her gaze fixed over his shoulder, assessing the exits. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Captain, I am here for a family function. I have no obligation to discuss historical artifacts with you." Andrew pressed her, his voice low and intense. "Where did you serve? Give me a call sign, a period of service, anything that can prove you are not a fantasist." Elena finally locked eyes with him. Her eyes were ice-cold and unblinking. "I operated outside the authorized chain of command. Before that, I was assigned as an uncredited asset to the Western Operations Group. That was a long time ago. Now I'm just Jake's mother." Andrew felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. Uncredited asset and outside the authorized chain of command were terms reserved exclusively for operatives whose existence was denied by the government. He knew she was telling the truth in the most technically evasive way possible. As the ceremony reached the pivotal moment, the reading of the Marine Corps oath, Elena tried to shift away, her focus entirely on her son. But the tension was palpable. After the oath and the thunderous "Oorah!" of dismissal, Jake ran, beaming, straight to his mother, pulling her into a tight, proud hug. "Mom, did you see me? I didn't move a muscle." Elena held him, drawing strength from his innocence, and whispered, "Every minute, son. I saw every minute." Andrew waited patiently for the reunion to subside. He then signaled to Jake to step away. "Private Ward, congratulations," Andrew said, maintaining the formality of the rank. "Now tell me, where did your mother find the strength and discipline to raise a Marine like you? Where did she serve?" Jake looked confused, his grin fading. "Sir, I told you she was technical support. She used to repair complex machinery. She's strong, but she's not a soldier." Andrew looked directly at Elena, his face serious. "Ma'am, I am now officially asking you to disclose your service history. If you refuse, I will be forced to call base security and the intelligence unit that is already tracking a possible data breach related to this facility." Elena sighed, a sound of resignation and profound weariness. "Captain, there are things buried in the archives for a reason, and a Marine should know the value of classified information remaining classified." The confrontation, however, was already beyond her control. Just then, the group of highly decorated, retired majors and colonels who had been listening to the rumors walked past on their way to the officers' lounge. One of them, Major General, retired Frank Reynolds, who had been instrumental in the search and recovery efforts in the Dash de Margot operation 15 years prior, saw Elena. He stopped dead. His hand, already raised to tip his hat to Andrew, dropped uselessly. The hat fell to the ground. Reynolds's voice was a gasp, thick with memory and horror. "No, it can't be. Elena Ward? Ghost 3? The entire group of veterans froze, their faces a mixture of shock and utter disbelief. They knew the truth. Ghost 3 was the call sign of the last survivor, the one who was presumed dead holding a crucial bottleneck, buying the team time for exfiltration. Ghost 3 was a legend whispered in smoke-filled rooms, the warrior who never came home, who was swallowed by the desert. Andrew's suspicion instantly morphed into chilling certainty. This woman wasn't just a survivor, she was an operational myth. Before anyone could speak, the harsh crackle of the base security radio erupted, cutting through the festive noise. "Red alert! Confirmed movement related to Ghost Recon Unit 12 assets. Perimeter security compromised. All senior officers report to the command center immediately." The past was no longer hunting her. It had found her, and it was demanding she return. The crowd's happiness continued momentarily, deafened by their own celebration. But Elena was already being escorted into the fortified security briefing room. Jake was hysterical, trying to push past the guards. "Mom, what's happening? You can't just take her." Andrew physically blocked the young Marine, his voice resonating with authority. "Private Ward, step back. This is not your battle. This is a matter of national security." Inside the Spartan room, 3 intelligence officers, including Colonel Miles Hayes, a man whose face was etched with 20 years of classified pressure, sat waiting. They placed the thick, yellowed, top-secret file directly in front of Elena. "Elena Ward," Colonel Hayes began, his voice flat, "or, as we knew you, Ghost 3, the only unaccounted-for asset from the infamous 12th. Elena remained standing, her silence a perfect defense. Colonel Hayes continued, flipping open the file to a satellite image of a vast, unforgiving wasteland. "Ghost Recon Unit 12 disappeared 15 years ago in the Dash de Margot desert. It was a failed high-value capture operation that turned into a catastrophic exfiltration disaster. We recovered 6 bodies. We recovered the intel. We never recovered you." Elena finally spoke, her voice strained. "I left because there was no one left to come home to. I watched my team die. I didn't want the military to turn me into a political symbol, a casualty who survived. I chose to disappear. I wanted people to see a mother, not a ghost." Andrew, still reeling from the gravity of the unit's history, interjected. "The red alert, it was triggered by your tattoo. The system is designed to flag any confirmed visual match to the Unit 12 sigil. It means the past didn't just find you, it activated a latent security protocol." Elena nodded slowly. "I know. I was sloppy. I forgot that today was supposed to be Jake's day. I forgot the consequences of showing my skin." Colonel Hayes tapped a chilling entry on the report. "According to the debrief of the surviving pilot, Ghost 3 single-handedly secured the final extraction point. You then carried 4 heavily wounded teammates, 2 with major blood loss, for 17 hours across hostile territory using only improvised equipment before collapsing at the designated backup rendezvous." Elena's eyes were distant, focused on the memory. "They were my brothers and sisters. We had a pact. No one gets left behind. I failed to bring all of them back. That's why I left the Corps." Colonel Hayes leaned back, his demeanor shifting from accusatory to urgent. "Ward, the time for mourning is over. The threats the 12th faced are evolving. We need your counsel. Your experience is irreplaceable." Elena shook her head vehemently, the denial absolute. "I have a new life, a normal life. I am not going back into the darkness. I refuse to lose anything else." It was at that moment, just as the confrontation reached its peak, that Jake, using his new Marine-issued wits, managed to slip past the distracted guard outside. He burst into the room, his face pale with fear and confusion. "Mom, what are these men doing to you?" Elena whipped around, her composure completely shattered. "Jake, get out!" Colonel Hayes saw the opportunity to break her will. He looked at the private. "Son, your mother didn't want to tell you this. She was a Marine, but not just any Marine. She was a legend, a warrior whose existence was denied by the Pentagon to save face." Jake stared at Elena, his face a mixture of shock and devastating realization. "Mom, you were in the war? All that time? The money, the travel?" Elena bowed her head, the image of the invincible mother finally cracking. I didn't want you growing up under the weight of my past. I needed you to have a safe life." Jake, seeing the truth, looked down at her wrist, then back at her face. His eyes filled with tears, not of anger, but of overwhelming awe. "Mom, you're not just a hero. You're the one they talk about in whispers, aren't you?" Elena's voice was soft, maternal again. "I'm just a woman, son, who tried to bring her friends home." Before the conversation could go further, a series of urgent, panicked shouts erupted outside, immediately followed by the blare of a medical emergency siren. A rescue vehicle skidded to a stop near the formation. A new recruit, suffering from acute, severe heat stroke, had collapsed. "Severe dehydration, core temperature spiking, pulse is rapid and thready. We're losing him," a distressed medic screamed. Another officer yelled, his voice laced with panic. "We need immediate stabilization. We need a field trauma expert. Now." Andrew looked around, seeing the chaos, the panic of the young medics, and the recruit's life draining away. He looked at the single, most capable person in the entire base. He looked at Elena. "Ward," Andrew ordered, his voice echoing with absolute command and desperation. "Ghost 3, save him! Now!" Elena didn't think. The maternal instinct to protect, combined with 15 years of suppressed operational training, took over. She sprinted out of the room, her movement fluid, silent, and terrifyingly fast. She reached the collapsing recruit, instantly pushing the young, hesitant medics aside. Her voice was sharp, calm, and utterly commanding. "Get his gear off. Elevate his feet. 2 liters of chilled saline now. I need ice. Any ice you have. On his major arteries. Bilateral checks on the femoral artery. Now!" She worked with a blur of precise, economical movements. Her fingers found the correct vein for the IV line instantly, without error, a technique honed under fire. She stabilized the young man's airway, and using the exact pressure points only learned in deep cover medicine, managed to prevent his blood pressure from completely bottoming out. She had stabilized countless casualties in the worst conditions imaginable. The parade deck was a minor inconvenience. Within seconds, the monitor attached to the recruit began to beep steadily. The breathing, while shallow, was regular. Life was returning. The entire crowd, including the new Marines, the officers, and the terrified parents, was silent. Then a slow, deep, heartfelt wave of applause erupted. Jake rushed to her, tears streaming down his face, embracing her in front of everyone. "I've never been so proud, Mom." Captain Andrew Stone stood straight, offering a salute that spoke volumes of respect, gratitude, and awe. "Ma'am," Andrew said, his voice husky with emotion, "welcome home. Do you believe the past doesn't diminish the true value of a person?" Comment, respect. That day, the legend of the Ghost Recon Mom permanently altered the atmosphere of Parris Island. She was no longer a civilian with a secret. She was an icon, a living testament to the absolute limits of human endurance and the fidelity of a warrior's promise. The recruits looked at Elena as a symbol of the ultimate warrior, a person who had faced the true darkness and chosen life. Jake walked with his mother, his posture straighter, his new Marine pride augmented by a far deeper personal pride. He finally understood the source of her unyielding toughness. Andrew formally approached Elena, this time not with suspicion, but with a humble request. "Ma'am, we need your expertise, not for fighting. We need you to teach these young men and women how to survive, and more importantly, how to bring their buddies home." Elena hesitated, gazing at the determined faces of the recruits. "I don't want to revisit the battlefield, Captain. I want to forget." Andrew's response was measured. You can't, but you can give them the knowledge you paid for. You can honor the people you lost by saving the ones we have now. The concept of honoring her lost teammates by teaching survival was the only argument that could have broken through her resolve. She saw a chance to give her tragedy meaning. 1 week later, Elena Ward returned to the base as a specialized tactical survival consultant. She did not wear a uniform, but her presence commanded more respect than any rank. Her training was brutal, realistic, and instantly effective. She taught the recruits lessons absent from any standard military curriculum. In one session, she taught them how to use standard-issue bootlaces and a sturdy twig to create an improvised, field-expedient tourniquet in 6 seconds, a technique that had saved one of her comrades' lives in the Dashti Margot. In another, she ran a high-stress scenario where recruits had to stabilize a casualty while simultaneously being bombarded with loud, distracting firecrackers and smoke. She moved among them, calm and precise, correcting a wrong placement of a bandage with a quick, decisive slap on the wrist. "Focus!" she would bark, her voice cutting through the noise. "The casualty is the only thing that matters. Your heart rate does not matter. Your fear does not matter. Only their life." Her teaching philosophy was simple, harsh, and maternal. Zero tolerance for error, absolute fidelity to the team. Jake watched from the side. He saw his mother transformed, not back into the Ghost 3 killer, but into the ultimate protector, the weaver of life. In the final quiet debriefing, Elena addressed the young Marines. "You don't have to be the strongest warrior," she repeated, her words quiet but echoing with power. "You just have to be the one who knows how to keep everyone else breathing and how to bring your teammates home, no matter the cost to yourself." A seasoned gunnery sergeant whispered to his staff. "She's not just teaching them tactics, she's teaching them humanity under duress. We are profoundly lucky to have her." The community shifted from simple respect to deep admiration. Parents of graduating Marines began approaching her after the sessions, not to ask about her tattoos, but to thank her for instilling the crucial difference between fighting and surviving. Her sanctuary of anonymity was gone, replaced by the far heavier but ultimately more fulfilling mantle of genuine honor. Do you believe the greatest legacy a soldier can leave is saving lives? Type honor. After her first cycle of training, the difference was immediately measurable. The recruits' first aid proficiency scores soared, and their confidence in high-stress casualty extraction was radically improved. She had given them a genuine chance at survival. Marines sought her out, thanking her for sharing the lessons that were not found in any standard military text. She consistently repeated her mantra, her gaze distant yet focused. "I just want you all to return to your mothers and fathers whole." One quiet evening, Jake asked her the question that had been weighing on his heart since the truth was revealed. "Mom, are you finally happy you came back to the military world?" Elena looked out at the ocean, a symbol of the vast, dangerous distance she had traveled. The memory of the Dashti Margot was still a raw wound. "No, I'm not happy to be back," she admitted honestly, "but I'm not running anymore. And this time, I came back to teach them how to save lives, not just how to take them. That makes the pain worthwhile." Senior commanders, seeing the tangible value of her presence, once again offered to award her a high honor, the Navy Cross for her actions 15 years prior. Elena, with the same quiet dignity, refused. "I don't need a medal to recognize what I did," she stated. "I need my son to know I sacrificed for him, and I need these recruits to know how to come home. That is my reward." As she walked off the base one afternoon, a group of new Marine parents, those whose sons had gone through her survival course, approached her, not with awe but with simple gratitude. "Thank you, Elena," one mother said, shaking her hand firmly. "You taught my boy more about respect for life than any lecture ever could." Elena simply nodded, accepting the compliment with humble grace. Jaggy, who had become her shadow, hooked his arm through hers, leaning in close as they walked toward her old dusty car. "You're not just Ghost Recon, Mom," he whispered, his eyes shining. "You're my hero, and now you're everyone else's too." Elena laughed softly, the sound of a woman finally unburdened. "I'm just your mother, honey, trying to keep the world's children safe. But all the Marines, the officers, and the parents at Parris Island knew the truth. They had not just seen a ceremony, they had seen a military legend step out from the deep shadows of history and choose to serve once more, not as a killer, but as the quiet, fierce guardian of the next generation. Her true legacy, the one she had fought to hide, was now written in the survival instincts and the unbreakable resolve of every young Marine who passed through the crucible of Parris Island. If you believe respect is the highest rank, subscribe to LN Steelheart Stories. Real people are creating and telling stories, not mass-produced AI.